I'm 100% against AI replacing human teachers. I think human teachers are hopefully one of the safest professions in this world. My view of technology has always been it should liberate the human teacher to be able to do more human things, which is forming connections with students and engaging them, and that the tools, whether it's AI or other technologies, should really just be about, helping that teacher make it more personalized, make it more engaging, etc.
Sal Khan is a parent, entrepreneur, and one of the leading thinkers when it comes to how AI is shaping education. His company, Khan Academy, was an early innovator in online education, and they now support over 150 million learners in 190 countries. Sal is not only thinking about how AI will impact educators, he comes at this topic holistically. How can AI restructure education to make it better and accessible to all? Our kids are heading back to school to start a new year, and AI is top of mind for lots of us. So on this episode, Sal breaks down how AI is shaping education. We'll talk about AI tutors, cheating, and what an AI-forward classroom will look like in the future. And I promise no pop quiz at the end. Hi, Sal. Welcome to Pioneers of AI. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Thanks for having me, Rana.
So you and I share the MIT connection. You did your undergraduate there, and I am curious, what was that experience like?
MIT, I found, I don't know your experience, people tend to either love it or let's call it not love it. I loved it. I was one of the people that loved it. I found like I was a kid in a candy shop. All the other people were so interesting and inspiring, and it made you better. And and I think it also builds confidence to be in an environment where like the person sitting next to you might be on the Russian math team or, and I'm just this kid from Louisiana, but you're like, okay, over time, okay, we're no different really.
I love it.
So yeah, for me, it was a wonderful experience. My wife, I met at MIT.
I did not know that.
Yes, there's
how cool.
Multiple. Actually, I gave a commencement address at MIT back in 2012, and I spoke how many couples came out of the place. And I made a strange joke that maybe it was a DARPA-funded breeding project, but anyway, that's...
Okay. I loved my time at MIT too. I did my postdoc there, and it was transformative. It's how I started my company, and I just love it. I come from a family that highly, highly values education, but I'm realizing that there's a growing narrative contesting the value of a college degree. So I don't know, I'm curious what you think about that, especially in the age of AI where you can do all sorts of things with AI and, do you really need formal education?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot to that critique. The cost of a 4-year degree from a private institution without financial aid is the cost of a pretty nice house in most of the country. And especially when it's not clear that it's even... We're seeing underemployed folks, even in degrees that a few years ago were super sought after, like computer science. We're seeing kids having trouble getting jobs now. I think people do have to ask the question. You students should be asking, what is the return on this investment? And it's not just the money, it's the opportunity cost that's going into it. And sometimes I get pushback from folks saying, well, but there's so much more about higher education and you're sitting at the quad. I mean, all these things that I loved about MIT. And I was like, yeah, that's true. But most people already aren't going to that experience. They're commuter students. They're not throwing Frisbees at the quad and joining fraternities and sororities and whatever else. And so I do think we have to clarify, like if we can't give people at least a path towards economic mobility, then I think we're not serving them. I do think it needs some reinventing.
We will come back to what that future of education looks like in a second. But before we do that, I am intrigued and I'm super inspired by the kind of OG story of Khan Academy. And actually both my kids use Khan Academy a lot, and especially my daughter who struggled with math when she was younger. She's fine, but she, it wasn't her forte. It wasn't her favorite subject. And so she was... I would say nudged by her mom to use Khan Academy a lot. And she reminds me of Nadia in your story of the origin story of Khan Academy. So I'd love for you to share that story.
My oldest was very easy to get on Khan Academy, and he found math, I think, more straightforward, but I've had to do some nudging with my younger ones. So it's happening in my
Okay.
house. I think the nudging's even harder when you're like, why do we have to use it? It's your software platform. That's why you're making me use it. I'm like, no, other people use it too. But
Yeah, just like hundreds of millions of kids use it too, right?
Usually that type of a flex doesn't resonate with your kids.
Yeah.
But 2004, after MIT, I'd worked in tech, then I went back to business school, and then I was still in Boston after business school working at a small hedge fund, and I got married in 2004, a year out of business school, and Nadia, who at the time was 12 years old, and it just came out of conversation. She was having trouble in math. I offered to tutor her when she went back to New Orleans, so I started tutoring her remotely. Slowly but surely. Honestly, it was a lot of confidence issues she was having. Had to deprogram that. She got caught up, a little ahead of her class. At that point, I became what I call a tiger cousin. I called up her school. I really think Nadia should be able to retake the placement exam from last year. They said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm her cousin." And they let her. And the same Nadia that was struggling became one of the stronger math students in her class and was able to place into an advanced track. And so I was pretty inspired, started tutoring her younger brothers. It was fun for me to just honestly stay connected with family and in a way that I felt was helping them. Word spreads in my family, free tutoring is going on. Before I know it, I'm tutoring 5, 10 cousins every day. But with a background in software, I started writing this very simple software to give them practice. This is back in 2005, 2006. And so that was the first Khan Academy. I got the domain name. It was a family project. And then a friend suggested, I was showing this off at a dinner party. The host of the dinner party said, "Sal, this is cool, but how are you scaling up your lessons?" And I was like, "It's hard, just getting on the phone, and I feel like I'm repeating a lot of the same lessons sometimes." And he suggested, "Why don't you record your lessons as videos and upload them onto YouTube for your family?" And I said, "That's a horrible idea. YouTube is for cats playing piano." But I gave it a shot anyway. And that kind of took on a life of its own. There were some people who offered some venture funding for it. It was tempting, but the second or third conversations aren't what I wanted to do. There was just all these people sending me letters from all over the world. Most of them didn't have a penny to their name on how they would.
Right.
So I said, no, this feels like I'll do the hedge fund thing. That's how I'll make my money. But let's make this a nonprofit with a mission, free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. But then a year later, I said, maybe I won't make money through the hedge fund thing. Maybe I'll, if I can just make enough money to have my family can have an upper middle class lifestyle, I'd be happy to devote myself to this thing. And that's when I quit my day job. And the first year was tough, but by 2010, we had our first real funding from Gates Foundation, Google, others to become a real organization.
My daughter just graduated college, and she is very mission driven and impact oriented. And so I want to ask you this, and she's kind of thinking through her next steps. What was it like to leave your cushy hedge fund job and start Khan Academy, and especially structure it as a nonprofit to kind of have the opportunity to be values driven? What was that like? And what's your advice to her and other people her age?
I get this question a lot from young people. And you can imagine young people are the most idealistic. They want to change the world in the best way. And I give them kind of a what I think is reasonably practical advice where unless you have something that you're ready to go off to the races with, like you've already seen, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, there's clear product market fit, you have a clear source of funding. Yeah, if you're Mark Zuckerberg in your early days of Facebook, run with that. But most people aren't. Most people have, especially if they're socially motivated, they're like, well, I just want to really help this issue. And maybe I start a nonprofit or I've created a prototype. And I was like, that's awesome. Like, keep working on it, but don't necessarily jump in with both feet yet, because that first job really starts to open and close opportunities for you. I've seen this with other members of my family where they tried to go a little bit of a non-traditional route out of that first job. And if it doesn't work, it's very hard to switch back into a traditional, let's call it corporate track. So I know this might sound ironic coming from me, but look, I did follow. My first job was at Oracle. And then I worked at some venture funded startups where I was able to get a salary. Then I go to business school. Then I work at a hedge fund. The hedge fund was a small hedge fund. It was my boss and me, but it was still, I was getting a good salary. And so I was able to save up some money. Some of those in fact, the business skills that I learned at Oracle and the hedge fund and the MBA, I use all the time. I try to run Khan Academy as the best hybrid of a for-profit and nonprofit. It is a nonprofit, but we try to have all the best practices of, being agile and innovative and being really conscientious with our resources the way a for-profit would be.
Amazing. Okay, this is great advice, solid advice, and it's going to be a required listen for my daughter. Thank you. I just finished reading your book, Brave New Words, How AI Will Revolutionize Education and Why That's a Good Thing. So let's switch to AI. And I want to take us back to the summer of 2022. You got an email from Sam Altman and Greg Brockman, basically wanting to show you GPT-4. Tell us about that meeting and how that was an inflection point for Khan Academy.
Yeah, when I got the email, we get probably 10 emails like this every day, and most of them go nowhere. But, Sam Altman and Greg Brockman were more, I knew of them. I knew they were legit. And that first email was before it even finished training. But when they finished training, they popped another email. We got on a Google Meet, and they demoed it for myself and our chief academic officer, and they put up an AP biology question, and they said, Sal, what's the answer? And it was something to do with osmosis. I was like, oh, it was like C, osmosis. And they're like, okay. And then the AI said, yeah, the answer is C. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I said, ask it to explain the answer. And it did. And then I said, ask it to explain why the other choices aren't correct. And it did it perfectly. And I'm like, wow. And then I said, ask it to write another question like this. And it did. And I started getting chills. And they said, would you like access? I was like, yes, please.
So then you, I guess, packaged all that together in Khanmigo, which is Khan Academy's AI tutor. What intrigued me the most is how you thought about some design principles as you put Khanmigo together. So can you talk about some of these, like the Socratic questioning as opposed to just giving you answers, and the memory function, which I thought was really interesting?
Yeah, well, you could imagine as soon as I had access, and was like, okay, this changes everything. We started having all the debates inside of Khan Academy that, frankly, the world is still having, which is, okay, this is cool, but what about hallucinations? What about math errors? What about safety? What about cheating?
Right.
And, the team was almost split at 50-50. Everyone thought it was cool. Half of the team, and I was probably more on that half, was just like, look, this is too important to not go all in.
Lean
in. The other
in.
half was like, hold on a second. But what I told that half is like, look, I 100%, your fears are valid. Let's write them all down and more. Let's brainstorm all the ways that this could go wrong. And let's turn these into features. Let's turn these into guardrails. And so cheating is an issue. Well, let's make sure at least our AI does not cheat. We're going to make sure that it's a Socratic tutor. It's going to ask questions, nudge kids in the right direction, but not give the answer. We're worried about kids doing shady things with the AI, unhealthy things. Let's give some oversight. Let's make sure it's transparent to parents and teachers, where they can talk to the AI as if, same way if you had a tutor, a human tutor, it's great for the parents or the teachers to talk to the tutors. Like, what have y'all been talking about? And the tutor might say, well, I'm a little worried about Rana. She seems a little bit down. She asked me, this one question, which was a little off. That's good. If a student talked to a real human being and said, hey, I want to hurt myself, that real human being should say, well, here's a helpline. And by the way, I have to tell your parents this. Like, this is something I can't. That our AI should have that same property. It should have a moderation filter that actively notifies parents or teachers if something is off. On the hallucinations, well, what if we can anchor it on our content, which we have a lot of? And we saw that dramatically, it's almost eliminated hallucinations. On math errors, now there's a lot of these reasoning models, which are essentially, we had to build it from scratch on the first version of Khanmigo, where the Khanmigo had to reason through the math, where it's like, what are possible things that the student might say, and how do they compare to the real answer? So you're making multiple calls to the AI to be able to, and we saw pretty dramatic improvements in math. And then we also recognized it wasn't perfect. It still could hallucinate. It still could make math errors. And so we have to educate the students and the teachers about it. And once again, this isn't a new phenomenon. Even using Google, you can get misinformation. It's not like everything on the internet was already a completely vetted source. So it's really important to educate people that, like, look, we think Khanmigo is by far the most legitimate AI in terms of tutoring and not making hallucinations, but it's still plausible. So you need to validate things. Don't rest only on what the AI is saying. Double check it. So that was and it continues to be our approach. And for the most part, I think it's worked well.
Yeah. I spent most of my career building artificial emotional intelligence. And learning is a very social and emotional experience, right? Students can be anxious or frustrated or excited or bored. And the best teacher is going to clue into these sets of nonverbal signals and then adapt the learning experience accordingly. How does Khanmigo do that? And does it do that? Like, do you agree that, these AI tutors need to have emotional intelligence? And what does that look like?
The more, the better. But I won't make a claim that it's,
it's there yet.
It's definitely not there yet. We're realizing that a great tutor doesn't just wait to be asked questions. A great tutor is proactive, motivates, guides. And so this next version that we're launching, actually we're piloting it as we speak with some classrooms, is a much more proactive Khanmigo that acts as a concierge, acts as a guide, holds students a little bit more accountable, gives teachers a little bit more actionable information, and, instead of just giving the raw data. So that's definitely where we're going. But to be truly emotionally intelligent, you have to be able to see facial expression. You have to hear tone. The demos are already capable of that. I think for it to be truly productized and useful, we're still a few years away from that. But I also want to be clear. In any world, I don't view this as a replacement for the real human in the room. Everything we're doing is assuming that you have that teacher, ideally. Now, we also build for, if you're a young woman in Afghanistan and you have no school, okay, how can we help you there? But ideally, you do have a teacher, and this thing can act as a teaching assistant and tutor for you and the teacher, and then it hopefully lets the teacher do even more. So if the AI can sense that Rana is a little discouraged, maybe eventually it can see your face and it says, well, she looks a little unsure. Why don't you go talk to Rana, teacher Sal? That's going to be way more powerful than if AI tells Rana,
says,
I'm giving you a virtual hug. No. Go tell your teacher to say, no, go talk to Rana, look into her eyes and say you believe in her. And I know today's hard. What's going on? Stuff like that.
My company, Affectiva, we basically developed facial expression recognition technology back in the day. But there's a privacy concern, right? I'm curious, do you see a world where we would have the camera on during these learning sessions for the AI to clue into these nonverbals?
My general principle is, this is kind of how we thought about the first phase of Khanmigo even. If there's something that can help people learn and get motivated and engaged, we shouldn't run away from it just because it also might introduce some tough issues. So yes, a camera looking at kids, it could get very creepy very fast.
Right.
But
if done safely,
it could be very useful. So no, I imagine in the next 5 years, it's going to, I think you have to be very careful who has that data, what they're doing with it, what can be used, training, et cetera. But if you can have a trusted party that information is purely being used to make the learning experience better, then I think it's absolutely a legitimate thing to be doing. You could imagine putting a low-cost camera or several in a classroom already, and seeing everyone's affect and seeing the noise and seeing, and then using that to tell the teacher, hey, you might want to try this, or you might want to arrange the chairs in this way, or, go walk over to that student. I hope that we have things that can help teachers. Once again, not police teachers, not be big brother, et cetera, but we're going to have to, it's a fine line to walk, but if it's useful, we should do it.
Let's kind of zoom out and talk about the larger implications of AI in education. It's back to school season, and I also serve on the board of my kids' school. Incorporating AI into schools is on everyone's minds, and a lot of students and teachers are using it, but schools in general, I would say, are struggling with how to incorporate it meaningfully and intentionally. And I just wanted to share some statistics. So according to Pew Research, Chat-GPT's usage has doubled in just a year among teens. But despite this, less than half of schools in the US have official AI policies. So how do you think schools need to be addressing AI head on? What have you seen?
I think you got to start with that. They have to have a very clear and I would say realistic AI policy, because even some of the places where they created AI, they're not realistic. The AI policy cannot say don't use Chat-GPT because they're going to use it. The first thing I would do actually is make it very clear to faculty that there's no such thing as an AI detector. Anyone who's telling you that they have an AI detector is selling you snake oil. Because what's happening is kids are getting falsely accused. So there's nothing worse than accusing an innocent person of being guilty,
right?
Especially a young person who's trying to do everything right. And I saw this, I'm also on the board of my kid's school, and I saw my daughter, she told me that she was using AI not to write her essays, but to introduce errors into her essay because her previous essay got flagged for AI cheating. But now when she uses the AI to introduce errors, it doesn't get flagged for AI cheating. So that's the first thing I would do with AI policy. The second thing about is you cannot ban Chat-GPT. You can't assume that they're not going to use it. So with that, you essentially, if you're writing or any type of homework, option one is do more in class, where like if you really care that is their work and no one else, like do it in class, which honestly has always been a good idea because you get more support, etc. The second is, there are tools like we have something called Writing Coach where the teacher assigns through the AI supports the student ethically, and then the AI, when the student submits it through the AI can give the teacher transparency on the process. And then I would say everything else, actually do use AI. I think it is healthy now, once a term at least, to have an assignment where the kids are saying, use any tool you want. Go use AI, create your images with it, create your presentation with it, go use Chat-GPT. But I want you to be honest on like where you use the AI, where was the AI useful, and what did you bring to the table?
In a minute, we answer some of your burning questions. Yes, we polled parents in my network and our listeners on their biggest AI education queries. And unsurprisingly, the cheating question came up high on the list. Leading up to this interview, I put a question out to like parents in my network and also, our listeners to submit questions they wanted me to ask you. And we had a really overwhelming response, but one of the questions we got was all around cheating. And you kind of alluded to it. And I kind of thought it was interesting. In the book, you talked about like the cheating taxonomy and how we might need to redefine what cheating is. So say more about that. And then I want to do a rapid fire. I just want to ask you, is this cheating or not? And get your reaction.
Well, a lot of whether something is cheating or not is dependent on what the norms that you set. And if you go out of the norms, it's officially cheating. And then you have to question, like, to what degree are your norms realistic? And the chapter in the book I write about cheating, I start with like, well, what was going on before Chat-GPT? Like, we're all worried about, well, there was a lot of cheating. There's already websites that will have a PhD in Kenya or India or, write an English PhD, write your essay for $5 a page. This has existed for 20 years. You have had people going to their sorority sisters and fraternity brothers who are real brothers and sisters and get their essays written. This is, you've had kids have these, Bibles of old exams that have, existed in a lot of these places. So that's why, once again, have a realistic policy and police the things that you say you care about, but then don't be unrealistic about the other things.
All right, so let's do a rapid fire. Is it cheating or not? Using AI to write the intro paragraph of an essay.
I know this might sound like a cop-out answer, but it depends on the norms that the teacher has set.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
It is okay.
Use AI.
Then it's not cheating. If the teacher says, I want this to be 100% your work, and you go do it, it is officially cheating. Now, the question is that realistic if the teacher is allowing everyone to go home? But let's say if we're doing an in-class assignment, and you're supposed to have your laptops closed, and I want everyone to write this essay, no AI, and I take out my phone and I ask Chat-GPT, like, that's cheating.
Okay. Using AI to brainstorm a story for your Spanish class.
My personal view is almost no cases is that cheating.
By the way, this was my son.
Okay. No, I think it's very good. I think it's, you absolutely should be using it for brainstorming in any case.
Using AI to solve an algebra problem.
Look, if it's homework, and if you're genuinely trying to learn it, I think it's fine. If it's homework and you're just trying to get out of it, and it would have been good for you to do it, as the saying always says, you're only harming yourself.
Okay, one more. A teacher using AI to grade a writing assignment.
I think it can be good if they're very confident that the AI is going to give very robust, consistent, non-biased grading. I don't think AIs are good enough for that yet. We have been doing research into that. I hope we can do that. And even we also think, and we've had these debates internally, we're like, well, we don't want to like take the teachers out of the loop because, our product manager who does our writing coach, where we would probably do this, she was a former English teacher. And she's like, look, it was so important for me as the English teacher to understand my kids' writing. And then, I said, well, but other people are going to create tools, and a teacher who has to grade 100 papers over a weekend, that's a lot of work. I mean, you yourself told me, Sarah, that that was like your worst weekends where you had to grade 100 papers about the Great Gatsby. Like, that's like 20 hours of work. I think it should be, you have to, one, make sure it's 100% robust, non-biased, and then have the teacher in the loop. Whether the teacher has to review every paper, that might not save them time, but if at least give insights to the teacher, or ask when there's an edge case, hey, can you review this one? Or let's create a couple of true candles together. Let's grade 5. Teacher, I want you to grade 5 to make sure that, and I'll give you a different 5 so that over the course of the term, you've seen everyone's writing, things like that. Yes, I think that can be, as long as it's good, as long as it's solid grading with good feedback and the teacher's in the loop, I think that could be good.
Okay, this was another question that actually came from my son's school leadership. If AI makes content mastery universally accessible, what becomes the new measure of a great education?
There's 2 ways to interpret that question. One way is to interpret, which I've sometimes heard people heard say even when search came out, like, oh, content's accessible, no one needs to know content anymore. My answer has always been the people who know content are the people who use the tools the best. So I think content matters. And I think there's another interpretation of that question, that AI might help us get so much better at content knowledge that maybe we need something else to differentiate ourselves. I think that would be a great situation. I think I'm a big believer of solid content knowledge, solid fact base, but then AI will hopefully open up the aperture. So some of the things that we've traditionally called intangibles or soft skills, like communication skills, empathy, listening skills, we could actually start to measure these things. And, I don't think it'll be like a score, like you are 100 out of 100 as a speaker, but I think already you could probably upload a video of you giving a presentation to an AI, and it can give you pretty good feedback on, hey, more eye contact, or you're talking too fast. And, eventually it could say like, look, I think you're in the top quartile of public speakers, which I think would be incredible if that can be part of our portfolio of, evidence of our capability.
I was going to go there next. I call them the 4 C's: curiosity, creativity, compassion, and communication. I think there's a lot of concern that using AI will detract from some of these skills, but I'm intrigued by this idea that AI can actually help you become a better communicator, or maybe it can help you find your passion faster.
Yeah, look, I mean, as you know, right now, the main things that seem to matter for high school kids are SAT scores, grades, AP tests. Those aren't measuring any of those 4 C's that you just mentioned.
Right.
And then the schools try to look at recommendations and essays, but we know that those are, well before Chat-GPT, affluent kids, and I write about this in the book, and they still are, hiring $500 an hour coaches that are helping them a lot look like they are, compassionate and empathetic. And look, hopefully many of these kids are, but some of them maybe aren't, and they're faking it awfully well on an application. So I think this is exciting. And it's not just AI. It's not like we have to apply AI to everything. We have a platform, schoolhouse.world, which is another sister nonprofit to Khan Academy, and it's peer-to-peer tutoring. And kids can certify their knowledge. There's a way where they take Khan Academy assessments and it records their face and screen while they're explaining their reasoning. If that looks good, then they go off and tutor. There's a rating system. And a lot of universities, we're talking University of Chicago, MIT, Yale, Brown, Caltech, I could go down the list. There's 40 of these universities that said, oh, we value that for college admissions, because it's a signal not just of content mastery, but it's a signal of communication, empathy. And now we just launched this program called Dialogues, where we're pairing kids with opposite points of view on tough issues.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, really hard issues. Like, this will give you a little anxiety about some of the issues, like Israel, Palestine, affirmative action, immigration, gun control, like stuff that most of us are afraid to bring up at dinner parties. They're not trying to convince each other, but they're trying to listen to each other. And their points of view don't get recorded. It does get recorded that you had a conversation on a topic. And then if someone says something positive, that like, hey, Rana really was curious, Rana was a good listener, then those positive accolades Rana, can share with college admissions. And a lot of these same universities are very interested in it.
What do you think about online learning versus in-person learning? And I ask that knowing that you have Khan Academy, but you have the Khan Lab School as well, which is an in-person school environment. What do you think about that, again, with AI as the backdrop?
I think the ideal is both. Khan Lab School, where my kids go, that I started, is a real physical school. And one of the design principles of the school, and we're always tweaking things, it is a lab school, is we should be maximizing human-to-human interaction. And the reason why I think it's so important for my kids, I see navigating conflicts and learning to communicate and learning to friendships and, like these things which aren't in, the Common Core state standards or anywhere. They're incredibly important. And in an AI world, they're arguably going to be more important relative to some of the other things. So yes, I think ideally you have both. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a place for, in certain cases, pure online. I just met a young woman from Afghanistan who did not have access to school. And so Khan Academy was her school. And she applied to MIT and they said, well, you have no high school diploma, nothing. We have no idea. And then she certified herself on Schoolhouse and became a tutor. And then just say, okay. And they admitted her. So pure online can be of use when you don't have that type of community.
Okay. Another listener question. What's something about the future of education that you believe deeply in, but think most schools aren't ready to hear yet?
I don't know if most people agree with me when I say it, but they're not sure how to operationalize this. I think the more that we can move to a competency-based system versus a seat time-based system, I've been saying this for years, but I believe it more and more, even especially with higher ed becoming very expensive and not necessarily delivering outcomes. And it's a fairly simple idea. Right now, a lot of when you even look at college requirements, they say, oh, you need to take 3 years of foreign language. You need to take 4 years of math. They don't say that you need to learn how to speak a foreign language. They don't say that you should know algebra before. They just say you need to have sat in a chair and kind of done what you were told for 4 years. So I believe in competency-based credit, and a corollary to that is mastery-based learning, which is, hey, competency-based. I take the assessment to see if I know my algebra. If I'm not where I need to be, I still have the opportunity and the incentive to keep working on it so that I can get to that level.
Yeah, love it. Okay, final question. And this is one I ask of all my guests. What does it mean to be human in the age of AI?
My answer to that is I don't think it's just about AI. This is something that I've been thinking about for a little while now. Like, I feel so lucky to be born in a society like we have, one where you're not held back by, what family you come from or ideally, the color of your skin or your gender. I mean, there's still issues in our society, but it's much better than almost any other society in the history of the world. But I think in this individualism, which for the most part I am a very big fan of, we have lost some of the things that we as human beings get meaning from. For most of human history, for hundreds of thousands of years, we would have multi-generations sitting around the campfire together, changing stories, singing songs, having rituals, having mythologies, having religions that connect us, that make us think about something bigger than ourselves. And I think some of that has been lost. And so even before AI, I was even thinking about ways that, how can I give my own kids or even myself ways to have the best of both worlds, where they're not held back by dogma or traditions, but we can pick and choose, but maybe form our own traditions. And we still find moments where we can think beyond, paying the mortgage or our 401ks or how much money we have in our bank or how big our house is. It's more of like, hey, why are we here? We're in this mystery. What is consciousness? Like, what is the afterlife? What does it mean to be a good friend or partner or parent or child? I hope when AI starts to question all of these things about our humanity, that there's going to be a gravity to some of these very basic but very important questions for us.
Yeah, in a weird way, it brings us full circle to the beginning of this, where you were this awesome cousin who made time for Nadia, right, to tutor her.
Exactly. And what I got out of that was missing from a lot of people's lives. It's just, I was missing that connection with a younger cousin. There is something powerful about being able to spend time with your family and being a mentor and staying connected and feeling useful to them, things like that.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was an amazing conversation.
Thanks, Rana.
Sal thinks we're overdue for a restructure of our education system. And I have to agree, there's a lot that needs to change. And AI, if used responsibly with students, parents, and teachers in mind, will be central to that change. AI will transform what kids learn and how they learn. Sure, AI tutors are the first step, but I'm also looking towards a multimodal future where AI can analyze our interactions, our classrooms, and our teaching to make them better. And imagine when AI gets weaved into experiential learning. I mean, what if AI could help my tech-allergic daughter appreciate computer science more by personalizing a curriculum just for her? The possibilities here are endless. So I want to know, what are you excited or nervous about when it comes to AI and education? Leave us a voicemail at 601-633-2424, and we might just feature your voice on the show.